Good evening, everybody. The April 16th meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment is now in session. I want to let you know that there will be a second meeting on April 30th to hear the remaining requests for that we thought we might be able to do in one meeting, but we're not going to be able to.
No letters, huh?
And that the application for 865 Islington Street has been withdrawn. So if you're here for that, you can go home. 865 Islington Street has been withdrawn. Well, it's late breaking news. It's late breaking news.
Okay, so 865 is off the table.
It is.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Okay. The first item of business is approval of the March 19th, 2024 minutes. Is there anyone to?
I have two suggested edits.
Yes.
The first is on the vote for approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. It says unanimous 7-0, but I abstained, and I believe you may have
Okay.
abstained as well. No?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, I abstained because I
Okay.
wasn't there at the February
Yeah, you
meeting.
know, I might have. Yeah. I can't remember which meeting I missed.
And then this second suggestion is on page 3, second paragraph, last sentence. I think it says 20.4 was rounded to 2%, and it should be 20%. Those were the only suggestions I had.
Okay. Does anybody have any other changes to the minutes of March 19th? Mr. Ram?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Ms. Nez took one of mine, which was the 2 versus 20%, but I do have another one on a little further down. I apologize. Yes, here we go. On page
I don't have
4 of the minutes, the last paragraph starts with Mr. Rayam said that, and about the middle of the paragraph, it has, in terms of the setbacks, he said there was some confusion about a front yard and side yard and so on. And the applicant, through the revision process, should have been more diligent, but he felt that the applicant was asking for in turns of an addition was far away from the setbacks. So instead of turns, which is a fine bird, but it should be terms.
Thank you.
TRMS.
Any other suggestions? Okay. So with those amendments, is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Madam Chair, I would move to accept the minutes with the corrections noted.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Record. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We can move on to the minutes of March 26th, 2024. Are there any suggested changes? Wow. Okay. With no changes, I'll accept a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Thank you. They are accepted. Okay, just a little business before we get started. When you are here to speak to a petition, if you're the petitioner, you get 15 minutes. If you feel like you need more, then please ask before you start and the board will vote on that. And if you're speaking to, for, or against, that we hope you'll stick to 5 minutes. Okay? Thank you. So old business tonight is 550 Sagamore Avenue, a request for a rehearing. Is there yes. Yes, Mr. Rossi is recusing himself because he has to recuse himself. He was not at the meeting. Is there discussion before we? No? Okay. So, would someone like to make, yes, go ahead.
Well, I'll open the discussion. I wasn't here for any of the discussions, but it seems to me that there were 2 votes. I want to make sure I've got this right. There were 2 votes, one to approve the variance, which failed on a tie vote, and one to deny the variance, which failed on a tie vote.
Yes.
And I guess I'm troubled a little bit because that seems to leave the applicant hanging, because there's not really a formal decision by the ZBA with 2 tie votes. Now I believe our policy says a denial is a tie vote on a denial, or a tie vote on a variance to approve, on a vote to approve is the same as a denial, but I don't think that's actually
It's what,
accurate.
it is what our zoning ordinance says.
It's what our rules and regs say.
regulations.
Yes, rules and regs say,
But I
yes.
think that conflicts with some of the guidance in the New Hampshire manual that they give us. Now, I don't know which takes
It has
precedence.
been our practice, but Ms. Margison, do you want to respond to that?
So, except for Portsmouth, all ZBAs are 5 members throughout the state. So for some reason, in I think 1953, they made Portsmouth Zoning Board of Adjustment 7. So the aspects of the statute, like terms of for 3 years, are not applicable to us. And therefore, a lot of the guidance that is in the New Hampshire, I think it's the Planning and Land Use Regulation, this Office and Planning Development and other things is not applicable to us because we're a 7-board ZBA. So our rules and regulations reflect the fact that we are 7 and not 5 boards, and it takes affirmative votes of 4 to approve.
Right. So we have a motion to approve that failed on a tie vote and a motion to deny that failed on a tie vote. I would feel more comfortable with a vote either way that was a firm decision rather than leaving it hanging with 2 votes that both failed.
Both votes failed to gain a majority.
Right,
Because
So,
I'll let you through. Mr. Vail.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, with regards to that, I mean, it's a difficult situation. On that particular evening, it was very unlikely that we were going to ever get a vote that would garner 4 votes. And we had this situation happen before, and so on our Board of Adjustment Rules and Regulations, page 5, it's paragraph 6. That was actually added during my tenure as either board chair or board vice chair, one of the two. We added that in because we had a very similar set of circumstances where we had a fairly controversial case, and it ended up in a tie vote. And we did not really explain in any great detail the reasons for the fact that we could not get an approval. So we had, again, 2 tie votes. We had 6 members, 6 panel members, 2 tie votes. And well, actually, I think in that case, we didn't even have the second vote. We simply said it failed to meet the requirements, and we never took another vote. And we never really had any kind of description from any of those who had voted against the application as to why they felt that the criteria were not being met. So as a result, we tried to address that issue, perhaps imperfectly, but it's kind of an imperfect situation that does happen where, especially because of recusals, we can have this six-member panel, which does lends itself to the possibility of a tie vote. And as a result, we did say the key factor is to make sure that there's sufficient information that the applicant understands from those who are not willing to grant the application, the reasons for not being able to make that an affirmative vote to grant the application. And with that, that's where that whole paragraph comes from. We were given, trying to remember if it actually came back to us. I think it might have, and it said that the board, there was a decision by a superior court that had indicated that the board had erred in not providing sufficient information back. So we had worked with planning staff, and as a board, we had decided to add that paragraph. So that just gives you some of the history behind it. As Ms. Marsden noted, we are unique in that we are a 7-member board of adjustment that is kind of unusual. But in concept, I think we follow what the state law calls for, which is a 1-person majority for, you have to have at least 1 over your half mark to be able to say that you're going to grant something. And the applicant references and basically says, hey, I should have had a full board. Again, that's not always possible. And while the applicant says I should be now given the opportunity to have a full board, at the same point in time with 6 members, We don't normally offer the applicant the opportunity to delay, but at the same point in time, the applicant never asked for an opportunity to delay. We could have taken that matter up. I have seen in the past where we had 6 members, the applicant was concerned about that, made a request to the board to not hear that particular application, and we did postpone it. So my concern with the applicant's appeal here and saying, hey, I should have had the opportunity, I do believe the applicant was given the opportunity, didn't avail themselves of it. And it's always a balancing act for the applicant, right? Because do they want to delay a month, or do they want to take some risk and try and move on in the present month? In my mind, the applicant took that risk, and that in and of itself is not a grounds for a rehearing. Now, that said, I do find it unfortunate that the information that was provided back to the applicant in terms of the reasons for denial are somewhat wanting, at least in terms of the written record. I think there was more discussion during the meeting that, looking back on it, was not really very well captured in the minutes, and not very well captured by the finding of facts sheet that I do believe is provided back to the applicant, correct? So if there is anything here that we feel is unsatisfactory by the board, it's really how that negative feedback about why the application was not granted that could be a cause for considering a rehearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Murchison?
And just following up on Mr. Rayum's comments, so I chaired that night, and I agree with him that the meeting minutes and do not reflect the robust discussion that we had. And we decided not to solicit comments because we felt like there was enough in the record that the applicant had for an appeal if they so wished. In fact, that's in the meeting minutes. But I believe there's enough in the record as we discussed it to justify the decision.
Other comments?
So I guess what troubles me with the voting issue is that the board did not stop with the failed motion. If the board would have stopped with the failed motion to approve, then consistent with our language in our rules and regulations, the applicant would have been denied the variance. But the confusing issue is we took a second vote, and that failed as well.
That is the practice of the board and has been just as long, right? For quite a long time.
Since this change was made, I'd have to go back and look at the history of.
Yeah, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying that is,
And it's if a subsequent motion fails to receive 4 votes. So the subsequent motion, the motion to deny, failed to get 4 votes. We did not solicit comments. I did not solicit comments because I felt like there was enough in the record to support it. So.
I just feel like there wasn't a decision. Because we've got 2 motions, both failed. They were countervailing motions on the opposite, and both failed. And so it's like there's not really a record of a decision.
if it didn't get approved,
Yeah, it's a denial.
then it's a
Yeah.
denial.
But the denial got disapproved, too.
Yeah,
The
I mean,
denial
I
failed as
suppose
well.
if this is something that we want to discuss in depth and see if we want to do something about it, that's certainly something that we can do, but not tonight.
Well, you could move for a rehearing and see whether
Yes.
you've got our agreement.
Is there further discussion? Mr. Metz?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on my thoughts is I do recognize and accept that a failure to pass is a denial based on our rules. But having said that, I could get on board with the concept of a rehearing because of both votes tying. It seems reasonable to me. I accept that as it stands, it's been denied. But I think it's something worth considering.
I'm just going to say one thing. Normally, the only reason to rehear is if we feel we didn't follow our own rules.
Okay.
So strictly speaking, that is the reason for a rehearing.
All I was going to say, I recognize, and Member Mattson and I would probably be on the side of, go ahead. But I think the precedent here has to stick with our rules. I think we followed the rules. And notwithstanding my vote at the time, I think we don't have a basis for rehearing this.
Okay. If there is no further discussion, then I will ask for a motion on a rehearing. Mr. Neese.
I move to grant the request for a rehearing. Based on the arguments I made earlier, I can elaborate if I get a second.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Metz.
So I think the reason for a rehearing is because, in effect, there's no decision. The argument that we followed our rules really, I think, is not accurate here. Because we should have stopped with the denied variance and not voted a second time. If the motion for the variance failed, in accordance with our rules, that stands as a denial, and therefore there's not really a need for another follow-on motion, according to our rules and regulations. Because of the second motion failing as well, I think it clouds the issue, because now you've got a motion to pass that failed and a motion to deny that failed. And so it's like, what was the board's decision? Neither one passed. And so that is why I would argue for a rehearing, solely on that point. I think it's a process issue.
Okay. Does the second have anything to add?
I guess I would just differentiate that I'm seconding a rehearing. I suppose my reasoning is subtly different in that I accept that our rules mean that the applicant was denied, but due to the infrequent nature of a affirmative and a negative failing to pass, I could see the usefulness of a vote, clarifying vote of, more affirmatively passing or being denied.
Comment on the motion?
So I won't be supporting it because I do think that our rules say if the motion to grant a variance or special exception results in a tie vote, the resulting decision is denial unless a subsequent motion is made that receives at least 4 affirmative votes. The subsequent motion did not receive 4 affirmative votes. It's a denial per our rules.
Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Mantle.
Just to Mr. Nees's comment, if the motions were reversed and the motion for approval came first and it ended up in a 3-3 tie, this board would entertain a motion for denial to have that finality. They both ended up not getting 4 votes, but they're both decisions of the board. You need the majority for any process to move forward. So if what I'm saying is, if instead of the motion to deny came up first, if the motion to approve came up first, and it ended up 3-3, that's a denial by the board, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The board
It doesn't matter.
would then ask for a motion of denial because the first one didn't get a majority. If we don't get a motion for approval, we're going to go motion for denial. If neither one gets a majority, the board's made its decision. It's split. But the application does not get approved.
I mean, in theory, someone could change their mind, and I think maybe that has happened, but this is such a rare occasion to have the tie. I'm sorry, I'll let you speak. Go ahead.
So I thought the motion to approve came first and failed.
It did.
It did.
So
It would have
that,
stopped there, it would have been consistent with the rules, it denied. But then there was the confusing thing is now there was a motion to deny, and that failed as well. That was the second one. If it would have stopped after the first vote, I think it would be very clear, consistent with our rules, that it was denied. I think the fact that the second vote was taken and also failed confuses the result. That's my argument there.
But the second vote failed to get the 4 affirmative votes.
But the way the rules are written, the way our rule is written, it implies that when the first vote fails to approval, somebody comes back with a modification to the first vote, which garners support for some sort of modified approval. That's not what happened here. We took a vote to deny, and that failed as well. And so that's why I think it's caused a little bit of confusion, which leaves it questionable what we really decided. And I think it would be firmer one way or the other if there was a rehearing and as Mr. Mattson said, there was some sort of, I don't want to say positive vote, but majority vote that said what the board was actually doing.
Mr. Rand.
I guess since we're in here, so on page 32 of our packet is page 7 of 11 of the applicant's arguments. I guess what Mr. Nyes is trying to talk to is this is, again, just a recommendation by the New Hampshire Office of Planning and Development. It's a handbook. It's not a law, but it does say, in the lower paragraph, in other words, if a motion to grant a variance fails by a 2 in favor, 3 opposed margin, assuming there's a 5-member board, that does not mean the variance is automatically disapproved. In such case, one of the 3 members who disapprove the motion should now propose their own new motion to disapprove the application, stating the reasons for denial. So I do think we actually are somewhat consistent with that, and we have seen that in the past where we have a motion to approve that does not garner the necessary number of votes, and it's kind of obvious that a motion that really it's denied. We do not just stop there. We do not say, hey, you didn't get enough votes to get your approval, you're denied. We then solicit for a follow-on motion to actually get a denial. And the importance of that is to get that information from those board members who feel like that the particular application should not be approved, to have them explicitly indicate what criteria are not being met. And then this is a basis for the applicant or anyone else who wishes to appeal the ruling, that they now have something to go and work on. But it does further say that this is especially important when there are fewer than 5 board members, in our case 7, present, since motions could result in a tie. Alternate motions should be put forward, but if the board truly cannot find something at least 3 members can agree on, the meeting should be continued until a 5th member can be present. So again, this is just a recommendation. It is, I mean, our rules, we tried to recognize that we do have a 6-member panel from, probably more often than we would really like, but with, recusals, with absences, it can happen. Should we have made more of an effort to try and then postpone until we could have a more full board? That's something I guess we can consider going forward. Should we retroactively apply it to this case? I think that's what, if I'm to interpret some of your concerns correctly, I think that's what we are being asked. So.
Okay. So, no further comments? Okay.
Sorry, I will add a little bit more.
No.
I guess I've gone around in a circle, and I would actually probably support the motion, partly because of what Mr. Nyes is bringing up, but also because I do think that our information back in writing, and we did approve the minutes. We went through, and I agree with the vice chair at the time, acting chair, that there was a lot of discussion, but I did look through our minutes that were provided by the applicant, and I just don't think we captured that very well. And we certainly didn't capture it very well in the findings of fact, which I guess, is it city staff that puts that together afterwards?
They're derived from the minutes.
Right, yeah. So, in that sense, we probably should have been more cautious about our minutes. We should have been perhaps a bit more diligent to, no kidding, really state to the applicant. So I would say between those two issues, I am on board with, I think the fair thing, I think the combination of those two deficiencies in our review of this application could rise to the level of saying that a rehearing is warranted, and just clear the air and get it relooked at.
Yes,
Just a question, when appeals go to either the Housing Appeals Board stuff or the Superior Court, what is the certified record? Is it the transcript of the hearing, or is it the meeting minutes?
This is a little outside my area of expertise, but I believe any written record that we have on file is sent, and a transcript can be requested.
Okay. All right, so I'm not going to change my mind because the, even by the appellant's own memo, and I don't know where it is in here, it says that, the findings of fact have to be very detailed, or that they can be, a decision, unless the courts determine that there are other factors warranting the disapproval. I'm very uncomfortable with sort of doing this on the fly, looking at our rules on the fly, and I think given that the certified record, the transcript can be provided, I'm comfortable with not rehearing it.
any further discussion? Being that Mr. Rossi has recused himself, Ms. Record will be voting with us on this rehearing motion. Okay. So, a yes vote allows the rehearing. Mr. Ram,
Yes.
Mr. Neese,
Yes.
Ms. Record,
No.
Ms. Margerson,
No?
Mr. Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Mannel,
No.
and the chair votes no. So, there is not a rehearing. Okay.
Should we take a vote to deny the rehearing request since the motion failed?
No, because it
No, because it had-
passed.
Not on the agenda.
Yeah.
Passed
it had
4-3.
It had the
Motion failed.
numbers.
The motion
failed.
failed for.
Deny the, I
Oh,
see
motion,
deny the.
that's right, the motion was to
Sorry,
deny.
got confused.
Should it be reversed?
Am I wrong? The motion denied.
Correct.
Yes, it was
Motion
denied.
failed
Correct.
4-3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Motion to grant
Motion to
rehearing.
grant.
The motion to grant
Failed.
failed 4-3.
Yeah,
So it is, sorry, yes.
3-4.
So it is just not granted. Is there a reason to look at this the other way?
To get a motion that passes.
To deny the rehearing.
To deny the rehearing, a motion to deny the rehearing would be the next step in my mind. And if that passes, then the rehearing request is denied. Right now, we don't have a decision on record because the motion failed.
You do have a decision.
we do
We
have
do
a
have a
decision.
decision.
We're
We're not going to
rehearing it.
rehear it.
Okay.
I mean, we could redo it if you want, but if there is a decision.
I don't see how this is different than any other kind of, what if we denied a patio? Wouldn't it be the same thing?
The motion was not to deny the
Motion-
rehearing,
right.
the motion was to grant the rehearing.
And it just
the
didn't
motion
pass, right?
Well, if it makes you happier, Steph, perhaps.
We can do that.
Okay, but I don't think it's necessary. I will move that we deny the request for rehearing.
Second.
Is there further discussion? Okay. A yes vote denies the rehearing. Yes? Okay. Mr. Ram,
No.
Mr. Neese.
No.
Ms. Record,
Yes.
Ms. Margerson,
Yes.
Mr. Mattson,
No.
Mr. Mannel, a second time, Mr. Mannel.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
I'm out
She's a-
because I'm an alternate.
She's an alternate, and we have the full.
We like positive motions here.
Yes, yes, okay,
We're positive in denial.
okay.
It's all about positive negativity.
So, for this next petition, we have, yes, you did. So there's been a request to postpone item B. Is there discussion? Mr. Mantle?
Make a motion to grant the request to postpone.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I would move to postpone it to, I don't want to say May, because I don't know what the applicant's position is, but we know how we want to have a definite date. So make it request to postpone to the May 2024 meeting. We routinely grant these requests to postpone. This is no different.
Does the second have anything to add?
I just add that the applicant is working on it to make it a better application, so it seems reasonable.
It does. Any discussion? Mr. Ram?
Madam Chair, point of order, should we read this into the record?
I suppose do you think I remember if we read these to the record? Yes? Okay, sorry, thank you. The request to postpone is the request of Karen J. Parker Revocable Trust of 2012 owner for property located at 86 Haven Road, whereas relief is needed to construct an addition to the existing structure, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to A, allow a 9-foot front yard where 10 is required by front yard averaging. B, to allow a building coverage of 29% where 20 is allowed. And 2, variance from section 10.321 to allow, I think that's supposed to say, a nonconforming structure or building to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 206, Lot 27, and lies within the Single Residence B District. Thank you, Mr. Ram. Yes.
And then I do have a comment towards the motion. I'll be supporting the motion, but the applicant on page 49 of our packet, the applicant's representative has indicated they are looking for a 1-month continuance, and they hope to hear it in the month of May. So I think our request to postpone it to the May meeting is appropriate. And, I know we had some going back and forth, I think, at the last meeting when we originally allowed to postpone the application. I do think it's appropriate that we gave a 1 month, so that gave the applicant the most flexibility of either being reheard at this meeting or once they had an opportunity to better understand the circumstances that they found themselves in, to then ask for the appropriate amount of time that they were going to need. In this case, the applicant is quite confident that that appropriate amount of time that they'll need to answer the board's questions is 1 month. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, so there's a motion to postpone until May. A yes vote is a postponement. So, Mr. Rams?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Ms. Record? Oh, sorry.
I'd like to object.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Item B is also a request to postpone. The request of Atlas Commons LLC, owner, for property located at 581 Lafayette Road, whereas relief is needed for after-the-fact installation of an awning sign, which requires the following. Variance from section 10.1251.20 to allow a 32-square-foot awning sign, whereas 20 square feet is allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 229, Lot 8B, and lies within the Gateway Corridor District. And there is a request to postpone. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Before we make a motion, I have a question for planning staff. I guess we don't have anything from the applicant. We only have the staff memo that says the applicant is requesting a 1-month continuance to provide information requested by staff. What exactly additional information was staff looking for?
I thought that I forwarded the letter along to you guys. I apologize if that didn't make it. the request from staff was to provide the existing signage on the site. We don't currently have a total tally of all the sign and the square footage on the site, which we wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't in the packet that was downloaded to our iPads. Maybe
No,
something
it was supposed to be emailed afterwards, and I apologize if that didn't make it.
It's possible I got it and just didn't
I don't remember.
see it, but
I doubt that. You're too diligent.
I would like to make a motion to grant the request to postpone.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, would you like to speak further to that motion?
Simply to say that if an applicant is not ready to proceed before the board, it does us no good to force them to come and make a presentation, and there's really no reason not to grant a request such as this.
Thank you, just the, okay, thank you.
Just I think this is our second postponement.
It is our
So they'll have to repost. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I think technically we are okay with a 1 month postponement because we had to renotice due to an error in the original noticing.
Right.
I can double check that. If that's not the case, we will be renoticing.
Mr. Neese?
So this is the second postponement for a property that is out of compliance with the ordinance. I mean, I'm fine with the second postponement, but I would hope that the applicant will come back this time and be ready.
I agree with you.
And
I definitely-
enforcement is aware of this.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so, a motion to postpone. Oh, I'm sorry, did you want to say?
I guess towards that end, to double down on that comment, I would recommend that staff, whatever condition that the application is in for the next time, that we be given the full application. And if we decide that we are not unwilling to give it another extension, we will review it based off of its merits at that point in time.
Okay. Okay, so, we're voting. Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Mannell?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So, they are postponed.
Is there a date for that set?
Oh, did we do?
May.
Yeah. Okay, the next item of business is item C under new business. The request of Cyrus, no, it's not. It's B, A, the request, I forgot we were in old business. The request of Chimberg Development LLC owner for property located at 6 Boyd Road, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing structure and construct a new primary dwelling, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow a 6,703 square feet of lot area where 7,500 square feet are required. B, 6,703 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit where 7,500 square feet are required. C, 85 feet of frontage where 100 feet are required. And D, 68 feet of lot depth where 70 feet are required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 175, Lot 13, and lies within the General Residence A District. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Good evening, Chair Eldridge, members of the board, Monica Kaiser from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts. I don't know if there is another member of my team on Zoom or not, but I'm happy to begin. If you want to zoom in on the 6 Boyd property highlighted in the lower left-hand corner.
Monica, I don't see anyone else on Zoom. Just so you
Okay,
know.
thank you. Thank you. So at 6 Boyd Road is an existing lot with an existing house. It's a small single-family ranch. It dates back to the 1950s. Previous owner was here before you, Frederick Bailey and Maple Heights Realty, for a number of properties in the area. Maple Heights Realty then sold this and all of these lots to the Chinburg Development Company. Chinburg is here to request the necessary variances to rebuild on this lot. So to tear down the existing home and to build a new single-family home. The new single-family home, I think if you go to the next page, complies with all the dimensional requirements of the zone. It's a little bit more centered on the lot. It is a larger home. And I believe the existing home may also be just, I'm just looking for my picture, a single-story home, or it may be a raised ranch. Let me just look at it again. Yeah, it's kind of a raised ranch. It's a one-story home over a garage. It's not clear to me if there's a basement area behind the garage that fronts.
Until you get back to the speaker.
So the existing home, the point is very small and quite dated. The proposed home to be rebuilt doesn't require any variances except for the fact that it's proposed on a lot that doesn't meet the criteria for the house that's on there now, but the new house will meet setbacks, coverage, open space, and all the other requirements. In terms of, if nobody has any questions, I'll just turn to the criteria.
Are there questions at this point?
I would rather wait for the entire presentation, Madam Chair.
Makes sense. Go right ahead.
So our memorandum is on page 54 of your packet, and I start to address the variance criteria on page 55. Essentially, the first two taken together, the variance is not contrary to the public interest. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. Given that the requested variances are to take down a single-family home and construct another single-family home on the same lot that's there, I would submit to you that that's not contrary to the public interest. Replacing one single-family home with another doesn't present any change to the use of land, building, or structures, the intensity of land uses. Turning to page 56 in your packet, the new proposed design, the site plan provides the required parking. It proposes a modern single-family home, modern meaning in terms of living size and features. There's not going to be any change to existing conditions in terms of lighting, noise, vibration, stormwater, etc. Preservation and enhancement of the visual environment. I would submit that a newly constructed home will improve the visual environment. The property is not in the historic district. I don't think the 1950s raised ranch is necessarily a piece of historic architecture as well, although it does represent a period in architecture. And then there's redevelopment doesn't have any impact on any natural resources in that particular area. So looking at that, I would say that there's not a marked conflict with the ordinance such that any of those conditions are undermined. The locality is not altered by granting the variances for a single-family home on a lot that has a single-family home now. That's the analysis. There's also no threat to public safety, health, or welfare from replacing one single-family home with another that meets all dimensional requirements. Substantial justice is done. Again, the question is if there's no benefit to the public outweighing the hardship to the applicant, the factor's satisfied. And I would submit to you that this is between one single-family house that exists there now and another single-family house that we propose to construct in conformance with the ordinance. There is no benefit to the public from denying a variance to put a different single-family house on this lot that currently supports a single-family house. That's the analysis. And so I would submit to you that substantial justice is done because the applicant would be more harmed by denial, then the public would be helped by a denial. Turning to granting the variance will not diminish the value of surrounding properties. A number of the properties in this area on this site had all been owned by Frederick Bailey. Many of them had fallen into some disrepair and were not ideally nurtured and taken care of, including the other property I'm here to discuss tonight. This property is fine. It's just a small single-family home, and the current owner seeks to redevelop with a new single-family home. There's no diminishment to the value of surrounding properties, again, to swap one compliant use with another identical compliant use when the new home meets all dimensional requirements other than the lot itself, which the current home doesn't meet. Denial of the variance results in an unnecessary hardship, special conditions. The lot exists now, supports a single-family home, despite not meeting the lot area per dwelling unit, lot depth, or frontage requirements. There's no way to make the lot conform, and therefore special conditions exist. No fair and substantial relationship exists between the purposes of the ordinance and its application. Again, we're proposing the same exact use, slightly larger home, but all dimensional requirements are met, and therefore there's no substantial relationship. And in fact, if you denied the variance, then the existing home would remain. But I would submit to you, if the existing home were to be destroyed by some act of God or fire or something else, then the applicant or the owner at that time would be able to rebuild either the exact same home or a different home that conformed with the requirements of the ordinance. And so this is really just an issue between intentional destruction versus not. I understand there are people that have strong feelings about that, but at the end of the day, the variance being sought is to construct the identical use on the lot in a manner that conforms to the ordinance. I would submit to you that that's reasonable, and that therefore the denial would create an unnecessary hardship. That is the 5 criteria. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the specifics or the criteria.
Yes, Ms. Margison.
So just a question. So it was almost exactly 2 years ago that we approved the variance for the 8 condominium units. And at that point, 6 Boyd Road was considered, the application material said that that eventually you would probably redevelop that lot. So just curious, why not include that? Why wasn't that included in the original variance application?
I was not involved in presenting the original application, so I'm not certain. All I can tell you is the ownership has changed, and so maybe had Maple Heights held on to the property, they would be here now, or maybe they would be here after they finished construction and sale of those 8 units. I don't know, but Chinburg owns the property now, and Chinburg is the applicant.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to follow up on that, I guess it's not entirely clear to me. So at the risk, spoiler alert, the next application that we have is also your same client. So there's 4 properties in all that are sort of defined by this little area between Boyd Road, Woodbury Ave, and 2 hotels. Of those 4 properties, your current client owns at least 2 of them. Do they own any of the other properties? And that of those 4?
I'm just looking to see if they own 175 Lot 2.
I guess my more pertinent question is, do they own the lot that is being developed with the condominium complex?
I believe they do. I believe they purchased the whole project.
Okay.
But
So-
I guess I would have to defer to, maybe we can look quickly at MapGeo to see.
Okay, I guess towards that end, well, my next question is, So the lot depth is described as 68 feet, but I don't see any dimension on sheet 60 of our packet. It's your drawing drawing C2. There's no 68-foot dimension. How is that dimension calculated? And maybe city staff can weigh in if they feel they need to. I'm talking for the lot depth.
Yeah, lot depth, I believe, is the average of the two side lot line. So if you look on any of the sheets of Exhibit A, which are pages 60, 61, and 62, you can see that as you look at the property from the street, the right side lot line is 76.36 feet. And on the other side, there are two dimensions, one of 20 feet and one of 54.47.
Yeah.
So I believe the calculation was to add those together and divide by 2.
So when I do that, I come up with a number that's much larger than 68.
Then what it may be is we can look in the ordinance definition, but it may be that you have to take those measurements at certain intervals along the whole lot.
Yeah. I mean, clearly it's not.
Or maybe they made a mistake and they thought it was 54.47 and 76.36. But if...
And that would do it, yeah.
Right, which,
That will do it.
yeah, at least in terms of lot depth, you might be closer to the requirement. I was looking through this and I couldn't figure out where 68 feet came from anything I was looking at. You don't have anyone here that can help assist with that?
I don't believe anyone
Okay.
is here.
Admittedly, it's only one of the three things that you're asking for. The other one, so you are running about 700 square feet short, just shy of 700 square feet short. So if your client owns both properties, there is no way to resolve that lot area issue. Ideally, as Ms. Margison pointed out, I think it would have been ideal that at the time that the condominium complex was proposed, that action was taken to try and make this lot more conforming. Understanding that the lot frontage would probably be the most challenging, although again, your client owns all these property lines other than the one against Boyd Road and the one against the one of the two hotels. You know, there's some opportunity there. I recognize that now pretty far along, and I'm not sure. I think one of the buildings is being built. I'm not sure if it's Unit 5 or Unit 3 and 4. There's something being built back there. I'm just looking to understand your client's perspective on why are they not trying to make this more conforming and requiring less relief from this board?
I think I'm at a disadvantage for answering that without having been involved with the project from the beginning. But what I will say is, I think if there is a home there now that actually violates the rear setback, and there is a proposal to construct a new home that conforms and pulls itself further away from that lot line, I mean, I assume there are other problems in terms of getting amendments to existing site plans and the like. But I think part of the reason is there's no difference between a single-family home that's there now and a new single-family home. And in fact, what's there is an improvement. What's proposed is an improvement on the rear setback.
Okay. That's all I have for questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Emil, did you want to say something? Ms. Geffert?
I want to be really careful about talking about what an applicant might do. I can imagine that they may have developed the condominium piece, gotten financing for it, this lot came available, and they've gotten something through many places, and
Madam Chair, point of order. We do need to be careful. The alternates can ask questions.
Yes.
They can't be part of the
Can
debate of
ask.
the board.
oh, my apologies, I didn't know that.
And I thought that you had,
Yeah, no,
Yeah, I'm
I
sorry.
apologize. Just
Okay, is there any further discussion? Any more questions
Yes.
for the applicant?
However merited your comments may be.
I think we're
Steph,
good.
did you happen to look at the lot depth requirement?
I did. It is the average between the front and the back, front and the rear on both sides. So it is that average calculation. I also looked at MapGeo, and the property records haven't been updated to reflect the new lot lines since they've been rearranged. So I would just, as a statement to the board, if the applicant cannot support a request that they have made, maybe think about altering the request and speaking through that with the applicant.
I'm totally
with
confused
respect
as to
to
how
the-
how we would alter the request at this point. in
Maybe
time.
remove that portion of the request, that 68-foot lot depth, if they can't prove that it's non-conforming.
Well,
I'm sorry, may I just, the zoning summary on the page we've been looking at says 68 feet. I don't know why we are doubting that particularly. Mr. Mantle?
When did your client acquire this property and the subsequent property?
let me look. (2023) Maple Heights acquired the property, well, Maple Heights Realty was before you, I believe, advocating for the relief they got on the other parcels while they were under contract. They eventually acquired the property in March of 2023, March 31st, according to the town tax card. Chinburg then acquired the property in August 30th, 2023.
Any further questions?
I think I have a question of Steph now, because I thought I understood this, but, so, the lot depth is the average between whatever.
Two different
okay?
sides.
So, and we've determined, though, that the lot depth, the average of the lot depth is 68 feet?
I think that is what's in question, is it 68 feet, or is it above 70 feet?
Well, if it's above, I mean, they need, the lot depth zoning requirement is 70 feet, so if it's above 70 feet and we grant them relief, there's no harm, no foul, because
Right.
they wouldn't have needed the relief otherwise.
That is one way of looking at it. My concern would be you would be granting relief for something that doesn't exist. But whatever you, I mean, it's whatever the board feels comfortable with. I just
I
wanted to
have to say, I
also-
feel very uncomfortable
Sorry.
with anything at this point in time. If we're not sure what the actual depth of the lot is, then we don't have sufficient information before us tonight to make a
I'm
decision.
just going to, if you look at the lot, the
You-
way it's shown, one is 74, I think, and one is 56, whatever they are.
One is 76 and one is
And if
74.
you average that, it is 68.
No, it's 54 plus 20 feet, so it's 74 and a half
So
feet.
there's 20 feet past the 54?
Correct.
Yep,
I thought I looked at, okay.
I think that must be
someone,
the-
you're right then, I think someone didn't look at that.
I think that must be the mistake that they made, and I should have caught that. So if you want me, based on that, if you want me to withdraw the request for the lot depth, I can do that. However, I would submit to you that we're talking about 2 feet, but I don't know if you were talking about there being a lot size or a lot line adjustment not reflected in MapGeo, but that was for a different lot, right? Not this lot.
So what I am concerned about is that the shape of the lot is basically a distorted trapezoid, let's say, and the left lot line being at an angle will naturally measure much longer than the actual depth of the lot. So what I suspect is that the 68 feet is a straight shot back from the front lot line to the pretty much parallel rear lot line. And that, is probably where they came from, but I don't know for sure. And I would be reluctant not to consider the 68 feet just because we're not quite sure how they calculated it. It's obviously not the average of 74 and 76 and change. That's, I mean, I'm no genius,
that's
but
what
I can do
appears-
arithmetic.
That's what the definition appears to say.
Yeah, that's not how geometry works. I know that much. So that's.
Can you
I
read
think
that
this six-
stuff?
I'm willing to take it as a given that 68 feet is correct and reflects the current condition, based on just eyeballing it.
How do you others feel?
I am comfortable going for it.
I am comfortable.
Yeah.
Mr. Ram, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I'm going to continue with questions. I do have a question for the applicant, if that's okay. So are you confident that 6,703 square feet is the correct lot area? Just for the record.
Yes?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I think you mean.
I think it's worth noting, this does have a surveyor's stamp on it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition?
don't all stand up.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? You may come up.
Hi, good evening. My name is Chris Randall, 80 Diamond Drive in Portsmouth. And I think we can all agree that Portsmouth is pretty much a transient community. Back when my grandparents purchased 212 Woodbury back in 1923, it was truly an intergenerational home. My great-grandparents lived there, my grandparents, my aunt, my uncle, my mother, my father, and my two brothers when my dad was building 6 Boyd Road, and that was built in 1952. My great-uncle owned the Brown Bungalow, which is at 216 Woodbury Avenue, Vincent Tessetta, and he raised his family there. At one point, my grandfather, who did own that entire property, either gave or sold to his nephew, Bud Tessetta, the Gray Ranch, which you see on 214 Woodbury. I have a hard time understanding how Portsmouth has this tremendous housing shortage, and those 3 homes which are now still standing are inadequate. Unsubstantial, I think, is the wording that was used in the memorandum. My mother lived in that home until 2000, probably 10 years ago, and that's when she moved in with my husband and myself, subsequently went to a nursing home. I can tell you that she washed and waxed those oak hardwood floors every 6 months until she was 85. Fred Bailey comes along and Mr. Monopoly, demolition by neglect, bought 212, 214, 216, and did make a deal with my mother that she could stay in her home until she was ready to leave. That was probably the most generous thing that he did. It allowed her to stay there until she was 80 years old. Or almost 90, I'm sorry, 90 years old. He stood in my mother's kitchen and said, I will take care of your family home. We will bring it up to speed, we'll rent it out. And then he proceeded to leave it vacant for the next 20 years, however long that was when he bought it in 2006. My mother's home, I think, still has the same furnace it did in 1952. It could use a new furnace, a new roof. The kitchen could be upgraded. A second floor could be put on it for much less than the $1.3 million that the other buildings are being built for. And this is something that is public knowledge. The Woodbury Reserve advertises prices beginning at $1.3 million. The Brown Bungalow is a 1930s style home, which in the south end would have been preserved. It could still be maintained. 214 Woodbury Avenue is a great example of mid-century modern home, which is a very popular style of home. Another question is, why are these variances all coming now? This has already been brought before the board. Variances have been made and granted. The buildings have begun to be built, but there's all this property that could have accommodated these homes. I'm not sure how often one can ask about, can I do this when I know I should have asked before? I don't really see that there's a hardship. The hardship is to the neighbors who have had their neighborhood disrupted and destroyed, really. These are people that many of them have lived there for many, many years and will not come out to speak because they know this is pretty much a done deal. Let's see, it's been considered a substandard home on 6 Boyd Road. It didn't fit in with the proposed $1 million homes. There was plenty of open space to accommodate that, but again, who's going to want to live next to $1 million home? Who's going to buy next to $1 million home? They don't look the same. It's just not conforming to Chinburg's criteria. Let's see. It is not in the historic district. 212 Woodbury Avenue should never have been allowed to degrade, but I do understand once you purchase a home, you can do with it what you want. I know that's how the rules work. I don't see that there is a hardship here. There is currently sufficient parking on Boyd Road. It does have a basement beneath the one floor that the home exists on, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, very typical for the 1950s.
Excuse me.
Yes.
You have used your 5 minutes.
Okay,
I'm
that's
trying
fine.
to-
That's
Want a
fine,
couple
I
more?
appreciate
Okay.
it. But again, I listened to what has gone on here. I wonder why this woman is speaking where she doesn't have all the information. Where is the rest of the Chinburg contingent who can answer these questions for you? I appreciate your time. I'm sorry that, this is going to be a part of Portsmouth that will not come back. And these homes are not conforming to the neighborhood. So there you have it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in opposition?
Phyllis Randall, 99 Boyd Road. I'm here tonight because I'm very upset. Actually, I'm angry, I'm disappointed, and disillusioned. When the project for the corner of Woodbury and Boyd was put forward, and my neighbors initially ended up speaking in favor of it, actually, it was reluctantly that we did so. Part of the argument put forward at the time was that the homes on Boyd and the adjacent homes on Woodbury would stay, and they would be renovated, thus keeping at least some of the original feel of our neighborhood. For 13-plus years, we have had to endure the neglect of the house on Woodbury as the owner, Mr. Bailey, was willing to wait to get his profit. The city seemed powerless to enforce upkeep, so we spent years watching what had once been a lovely old home fall apart. Talk about hardship. We've lived it. Now the developers are about to renege on the original plan. Yes, they are not the ones who originally put forth that plan, but they should have be held to that agreement. There is no good reason except for corporate greed that these homes should be demolished. It sounds like a perfect example of bait and switch to me. The new condos already take up a huge portion of that property, which was combined solely to allow maximum density. Now, should these existing homes be torn down, it is only so that more expensive additional units can be built, thus allowing the developer to increase their profits. Where is the benefit to the neighborhood? I see none. Why must every home in Portsmouth now cost over $1 million? There's still a need in this city for modest homes. Not every home needs to be torn down so developers can build another McMansion. The bungalow at 216 Woodbury is an example of a piece of unique American architecture. Why must it go? As for the number 6 Boyd Road, that has been part of the same family that owned 212 through 216 Woodbury, and now any sign of that family's history in the neighborhood would be obliterated. I recently read an article in the newspaper written by a former member of the planning board. She accused the board of rubber stamping developers' projects and ignoring the needs and wishes of the neighbors. I'm hoping that this board will finally take note and stand up for the neighbors, the people of Portsmouth, and the character of the city itself, and deny these 2 petitions. Please do the right thing for the neighborhood, not the developers. And on a final note, the building site itself is a mess, which is hardly speaks well for Shinberg, and yet it is another slap in the face to those of us who live there. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Martin Ryan. I live at 221 Woodbury Avenue, and I have for the last 28 years lived at 221. I sent out a letter earlier this afternoon. I don't know if you received it. Can I pass out? It involves photographs of the site, the area.
Just pass it down. Thank you.
Well, you get a chance to look at the handout there. That was a wonderful history of the neighborhood. I wish I knew as much. That's great. But as an abutter, I'm against any further intensification of the construction activities at the Chinburg construction site. After living with an abandoned house for over 2 decades, I wanted a win for the neighborhood, so I agreed to what was proposed by the previous developer. The neighborhood has since lost a one-of-a-kind Victorian, and now we have the developer proposing the removal of a classic bungalow-style house and also a house that's been part of the neighborhood fabric for decades. These houses, you heard about the generational families who had lived and occupied those houses. They're part of the community. I cooperated with the previous developer because, as I said, I'm not against change or growth. I want a better architecture for the neighborhood if we were to lose these homes. I have a home that's over 100 years old. I've done everything I can to maintain it. I understand how difficult that can be. What we're seeing now proposed to replace with demo is literally catalog style cookie cutter houses. These come out of a catalog on a website. Additionally, what we have and have had for months now is a very poorly run site. The construction entrances were not properly placed. During the worst of it, there's soil tracked on Woodbury Avenue and on Boyd Road. It has gotten so bad that we've had just mud caked in the road. I've reached out to the city, I've reached out to the developer, and they have addressed it. They've swept it, but it's a daily situation. I think Mother Nature does more of a better job of cleaning the street than the developer with the rains and the snow and things like that. On wet days, it's muddy. On dry days, it's cloudy with dust. I just had my home scraped and painted at 221 Woodbury. It's now covered in dust. You can see from the photographs. We can't sit on the front porch. It needs to be cleaned. The finished look is gone. And I paid considerable money to have that done. So under the circumstances, I would say that the contractor and the developer have not been good neighbors, and they are not capable of managing more site work. So I would ask that you please deny any further demo. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone to speak to, for, or against?
Good evening. I'm Mark Ayotte. Live at 9 Garden Street. I've been born up the hall here, been around town for a while. I have like one question. We came here over 2 years ago, and Mr. Bailey was given a variance for the 4 pieces of property. I would assume, am I assuming, or is it the rule that that variance governs what happens on those 4 lots presently?
Do you know the answer to that?
I can address that when it's my turn.
All right, you can go when it's the next round.
Yeah, I kind of already know the answer, but I just wanted to see what I was going to get from the board. So we all came here a little over a couple of years ago, and the plan was, through a couple of mitigating moments out in the hall, we'll reduce the footprint on 6 Boyd, 214 and 216, allowing 8 condominiums to be built. They'll leave the houses. That was the variance, and that's what was issued by this board. Now, because of a condition that the owner created, because I believe the variance rides with the property, not the owner, the variance that was created at that point is the one that governs the property, to the best of my knowledge. So I'm wondering how and why we can come here now today and make adjustments to that when they were not, in fact, identified initially. And I have one other question. The inspection department has posted a sign for demolition on 214 Woodbury Avenue. So I talked to the head of the inspection department today and asked what the plan was with the property once the building was demolished. They said they have none. There is none. I said, well, that seems kind of odd to me that a person can get permission to completely demolish a building with no plan to rebuild on the lot. He said, oh, he has the right to, the person has the right, the owner has the right to have the building demolished. So it seemed odd to me. So I can't help but wonder if we're going to all be back here in a couple of weeks, a month or two, talking about that property again as well. So it's just kind of odd. We make agreements, people bring things, present things, show everything. Everybody agrees on stuff, principles and requirements are issued. And then we can come back and we can change them, I guess, whenever we want. We don't adhere to them. It just doesn't seem like a very positive process for the neighbors in the town, that sort of thing. So I just want to make sure everybody understood that. So thank you for letting me speak.
Of course, thank you. Anyone else to speak to, for, or against? No. Oh.
Hi, my name is Sharon Kempe. I live at 55 Boyd Road. I am directly across from 6 Boyd Road, and I have been across from 6 Boyd Road for most of my life. And I'm upset with the plan because, first of all, originally this was supposed to be renovated. These houses in the original proposal, they told us as neighbors, we're going to renovate the existing houses as we build the others. And at the time, they needed variances to change the lot lines of these others. I didn't agree at that time because I felt like the project was too large, but now the project is taking place, and here they have a new owner that has said, we want to tear down the existing and build anew. Those homes were lived in until last summer when they evicted everyone. There's nothing wrong with those homes. They were supposed to have been renovated, and I don't understand why they have to be torn down. I just, as a resident, I don't understand how construction companies can come in and we have rules in place for building, and then all of a sudden they want to change the rules. So the board changes the lines that they have to go by. I'm not a construction person. I don't understand it, but to me, it seems like if you have set a set of rules, then they should be abide by. They shouldn't have to change to conform for someone to build a home so they can charge more money for it. Because my common sense tells me if the existing homes were renovated, they wouldn't be able to sell them for $1 million, which is probably the ultimate goal, I'm assuming, as a common person that sees the price tags of the homes that are being built across from me now. I don't think that it's going to help the neighborhood to have more $1 million homes. I don't agree with the whole project itself, so I'm not a good person because I didn't agree with the way the entrance to that whole thing is. It's coming right across from where Manor Drive is, and all the elderly and handicapped people that live there are now going to have traffic coming, and I just, there's no sidewalks on Boyd Road. There's going to be more traffic, but anyways, I'm here to say I disagree with demolishing. I disagree with changing the lot lines to suit someone to build bigger homes to charge more money. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else speak to, for, or against?
I'm Karen Foy. I live on 79, right across from 6 Boyd Road. Only to me, it's the Collins house. I'm here opposed to tearing down these homes because the agreement was to renovate them. I want to hold you guys accountable. Do you know how many houses have come down in Portsmouth, just let rot and ruin so someone can put up $1 million homes? And we have such a housing crisis. It's crazy. There's nothing wrong with 6 Boyd Road. They evicted the people living there. They were great neighbors, and now they've just let it sit. No one's there. Who knows who goes in there at night, because sometimes you see lights on. And I agree with Phyllis about Chimberg. Sometimes I come home from work at night to go drive down the street. We now have a single lane road because they have so many trucks parked on each side of the road that I don't think a fire truck could get around the corner if there was a fire. So I'm not really trusting anybody with any of this because nothing's worked out the way the agreement was. So I would like to hold you as our representatives accountable and not let this happen to our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. To, for, or against? You may come back.
Couple things. I think the board knows mostly what I'm going to say, which is that you have to focus on simply the variance being requested. I believe Ms. Margison is in the best position, since it sounds like she reviewed the previous file, to answer the question before that some of the neighbors have raised about the previous variance. That the site plan at Exhibit A indicates that there was one variance granted for the previous proposal to allow the 8 dwellings on the adjacent property. I don't believe that there was any relief granted for 6 Boyd or the other Woodbury property that we'll discuss next. And as the subsequent purchaser of the big development, Chinburg is required to proceed in accordance with the submitted plans for that adjacent property. I don't believe there is a condition on the relief that was granted for that property that said what you had to do with the properties on the adjacent sides. And it sounds like from what Ms. Margison has said is that when Maple Heights was here previously, they said, yeah, at some point, we're probably going to get rid of that.
Excuse me.
I'm relaying what the vice chair said earlier today at the beginning of the meeting on this. So that's number one. Number two, as I'm sure the board and many other community members are aware, Chinburg Development Company has done an incredible amount of work around the seacoast, restoring historic properties, restoring the Frank Jones Mills, restoring other mill buildings down at 800 Islington. There's now, where there were these sort of derelict buildings that were fenced off and not being utilized, now support hundreds of homes and offices. And that company has gone around in all of the old towns restoring those kinds of buildings. We've been to the Newmarket Mills over there by the waterfall, the number of nice restaurants and beautiful loft apartments in those homes. That's this company. So I don't think, frankly, that it's fair to call out the demolition of other structures as if this is something that this company does all the time. They really do make an effort to restore some of the beautiful historic buildings in our area. The other thing I want to say, and you know, I've had conversations with Chair Margison in the past. We have kids together. We've certainly sat around and bemoaned, before I did this kind of work, bemoaned the amount of development in this town. What I have learned in the last 8 years since I've begun doing this work is that it is not as simple as it might seem to the outsider. Fact of the matter is that everybody has a right to own their property, to build it up, to tear it down, to develop it however they want. It is a constitutional right that this country is founded upon. And that's just the way it is. And the other thing is that every single one of these properties that gets purchased by a so-called bad developer has been sold by a long-term community member. Every single one. So my point is, if community members do not want to get the value of their homes, they can make different decisions about how they exercise their constitutional right to dispose of their property. But that is not what community members do, nor should they. Every community member who has owned and invested and slaved and sweat equity into their home, when they go to sell it, they want to sell it to the highest bidder. And the highest bidder is often going to be a developer like this. If there was somebody else who wanted to purchase the 1950s ranch, other than Mr. Bailey, from the woman's grandmother, then perhaps that would have occurred. But that's not what happened. That house is abutting a commercial property. It's very small, and apparently the market does not offer an independent person to just come in and buy that. That is unfortunate, but that is the situation that we have. So for those reasons, and by the way, I live in a historic district on Park Street in a Sears Kit home. So every time there has been development of neighborhoods throughout the country, there have often been groups of development at one time or another from a kit. And some of those buildings are historic today.
Anyone else to speak to, for, or against? Okay, then the public hearing is closed.
I'd like to make a few comments, if I may.
Yes, please do.
If I recall correctly, I was one of the people who voted against the development of the commercial property as it exists today when it was presented to us 2 years ago, but that's basically irrelevant to the current discussion, except I want to acknowledge the concerns and the comments that have been made by the abutters to the property and the people in the neighborhood. I think that you all are raising some very interesting points, and it is worth going back to the to the variance request for the commercial property and seeing what exactly was promised, what was committed to, because when we approve variances, we approve them as presented and advertised, meaning that what's presented and what's promised is a condition of the approval. And this is kind of an interesting lesson for all of us, I think, and that is that with regard to the two properties that are being presented for variances today, what was actually promised, what was in the written application for variance, was that there would be improvements to the existing homes/lots. That's lawyer speak for we could do whatever we want. And that's really what was put in place, and therefore I don't think there is anything in the original application for the variance that says, well, they really promised that they were going to keep these homes as, present on the lots. They may have made other promises to all of you individually, but that's not what was presented to this board, and that's not what was approved. And, that's just something that I take into consideration because I take your comments very seriously, and I do think it's important that people present accurately to this board. Another thing that was said to this board is that one of the rationales for the commercial property was to present the opportunity for reasonably, moderately priced homes in the Portsmouth area. Obviously, that has not happened, at a price point of $1.3 million per unit. However, that really has no bearing on the current application. Maybe it's just a lesson learned for this board, because we are often told that if we make variances that pertain to the density of development, that the increased stock of housing in a certain location will bring housing prices down in Portsmouth. It really doesn't seem to work that way. That's just kind of lesson learned for me. Maybe other board members will think about that too as we hear future variance requests that have that as a rationale. Having said all that, the other thing I would like to say is that this is not within the jurisdiction of this board to, we did not change on this board the lot lines or how those lots were allocated with regard to that original application. The only variance that was presented and approved was with regard to the density of development and how many dwellings could be put onto a single lot. And so part of the way this board operates is that we focus on the specific variance that is being requested, and that's really our jurisdiction. And in this case, the specific variance that's being requested is simply that we would allow essentially exactly the same use of the property, which is a single residence dwelling, and that it would be on an existing lot that is already non-conforming for that use. And that's really all that we have to consider. It's certainly not within our jurisdiction to make a judgment about the competence of the developer and how they're managing the site and whether they're creating dust for the neighbors. I understand those concerns, but they're not really, in my opinion, part of the basis for how we can make a decision. So despite all of those seemingly complicating factors, to me, this is a pretty simple case. We have an existing use on a non-conforming lot. The proposed variance is simply to allow the continuation of that use with a new building that performs the same function. And that's really all we have to consider. I am in favor of granting the variance.
Would you like to make a motion?
Well, I'd like to give my fellow board members a chance to tell me why I'm wrong.
I'm not telling you you're wrong. Mr. Neese?
I guess I'd look for some clarification from Mr. Rossi as to which meeting this was. I was not on the board back then. Is this the April 19th, 2022 meeting?
For, let's see, 2022, it
April
was
16th.
April 16th?
19th, 4/19/2022.
Today's
And this was the request from Tuck,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
I'm looking at the written request, and it, under granting the variances will not diminish surrounding property values. I'm looking at the sentence that says, the closest abutters to the 8 units are the 3 remaining single-family units to be purchased by Tuck and renovated. And then it goes on to say, the 3 existing homes to remain are intended to be rehabilitated and their adjoining yards cleaned up. With
Yeah, there's
approving the
another-
3
yeah,
remaining
go ahead.
single-family homes. It doesn't say properties, it says homes, which I'm interpreting as support for the idea that Tuck said they weren't going to remove these homes. Related to the comment that we have in all of our meeting package, and this is, I guess, a question for those with more experience than me, the issue of what does it mean when we say certain representations made at the meeting are considered to be conditions of granting the variance?
Ms. Murchison?
So in April 2022, they identified the homes by their lot numbers, 2, 3, and 13. I mean, I'm not an expert on conditions, but, anything that the applicant says is considered conditions upon which we have granted the variance. We always say as presented and advertised. So it's not an express condition. We don't put stipulations in our variances, like you said this, and therefore, that's why we gave you the variance. Everything that they say is considered a condition. Their presentation.
And do I pronounce your last name Nice?
No, it's niece as a nephew?
Niece as a nephew, except the opposite. Okay. On page 5 of 7, there's a sentence that reads, "This is especially true where, given its location and surroundings, granting the variance will provide 8 relatively reasonably priced homes in the city of Portsmouth to include vegetated screening, blah, blah, blah." And then the next sentence, vegetated screening and significant improvements to the 3 existing homes / lots. So to me, that reads that
When the lot was unbuilt of the original 422.
it doesn't say only one lot. It said lots.
House/lots.
Lots, not lots. So I could read that as, yeah, we're improving the lot by demolishing and, rebuilding a house.
Motion didn't make that a condition.
Yeah.
But even so, that all pertains to a variance that was made 2 years ago. I don't know to what extent we could hold these other 2 properties, even though they're now all owned by the same person.
It's expired.
It's not really an enforceable item for us. How do we hold them accountable to that claim when we're really talking about 2 different properties now that could very well have, be owned by completely different people? They're not, but could be. So I don't see that is within our jurisdiction to say that because a adjacent property had certain representations, that those representations would be binding to the owners of the current properties under consideration. I don't see how we could do that.
Ms. Murchison?
So it's clear when this came before us in 2022, they were very clear about what they would do with those other 3 lots. My concern is, I don't even know if this is possible, that there may be
Could you
some,
clarify, what do you think was clear?
that the other 3 lots would be improved. The one, 6 Boyd Avenue, 216,
When you
and then
mean-
there's a.
when you say improved, what do you mean? by that?
That they would, they were going to do something with them. So, and that was not part of the variance criteria, so, because that's a separate lot. Those are separate lots. My concern is with common ownership. I mean, I will say that I have the same exact feelings as Mr. Rossi. I did not agree with the variance that we approved 2 years ago, but we approved it. And I think that this is a completely different application. I don't think I think that it merits a variance. My concern is whether or not these are somehow all going to be merged into one lot, into one sort of homeowner association or something like that. I don't even know if that's possible because the site plan has already been approved for the existing 8 condominiums. But, I mean, that would be my only concern about this.
Mr. Mantle, your hand was up.
Yeah, I voted for the development for a number of reasons. Mainly they had enough room, but with a few exceptions, most of the neighbors who came out spoke to it. Now, don't know what promises were made. I assumed when they said the other two houses in question were going to be renovated, improved, whatever, I think myself and the neighbors took that at face value. I disagree with the attorney's comment as far as everybody is going to sell their lots to developers or things of that nature. I don't see the market being high for a single-family house that abuts an 8-unit construction site. That basically tears down the value of that single-family house, which would have been a great reason to deny the variance that already came out, but that didn't happen. My concern is, since this is one owner for this entire block, and has been for over a year now, they've made no effort to make this specific lot, as far as the land thing, more conforming, since they can make that application to the planning board to adjust the lot lines to make it less non-conforming. I don't see the hardship. The only thing that's been presented as far as hardship is the applicant's desire to demo the house. Her argument says that, well, if this was an act of God, we wouldn't even think about it. We would allow them. I'm like, it's probably true, because it was an act of God. But this isn't an act of God. So where's the hardship of that, outside of that, other than the desire to build a new house? I don't see it. Thank you.
For me, this is, aside from all the emotional turmoil that it's created, this is the merest of requests. The lot size doesn't meet the current zoning size. But we approve these all the time. The house is not taking up more space than the other house took up. The same lack of depth is exactly what it was before. The same street frontage is exactly what it was before. This is a lot that's undersized. And I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be able to use it to build another single-family home. That I think this ask is very small and separate from the 8-unit request. I'm going to let Mr. Ray.
I think
The house is double the size.
But it isn't infringing on any of the,
Didn't say that.
right, okay,
Okay.
yes, I'm sorry, that was my point, it's not infringing.
I think
Mr. Raymond.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. Yeah, so, and to Mr. Mandel's point, I'm trying to ignore that the applicant's representative kind of implied like the applicant would torch the house if they didn't get this approval. So I'm trying to ignore that piece of what was presented tonight. But I guess, and I understand, well, first of all, we need to be careful that we say we always approve this type of situation. Each and every application that comes before us is unique. We look at the criteria, we compare it against that, and we determine whether or not it's applicable. This lot is not meeting the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And to me, and I would agree, in many cases, there are some good justifications, and it does come down to, is this a buildable lot? There are some good justifications that are put forward as to why the zoning ordinance should not apply to that particular lot. That said, to this particular lot, I do have some concerns in the sense that there was a very recent opportunity, and I know there's some concern, are we speculating on what the applicant could have done? Okay, but at the same point in time, we've got we could potentially have an applicant, I think this is an example of it, we've seen others in the past, where, okay, we're going to push the envelope with something, and then we're going to come back and we're going to push the envelope some more, we're going to come back and we're going to push the envelope some more. So I do think that there was a very recent opportunity, and perhaps even still is an opportunity, for this lot to be brought into, if not full compliance, a lot more compliance with the zoning ordinance in terms of the overall square footage. So in a sense, the applicant, through the variance that they previously got on the adjoining lot, got their cake, and now through requesting this additional variance on this lot, which was not presented as part of the original package, they will get now get the additional cherry on top, the eat their cake too, whatever analogy you want to use. And I am concerned about that, and I do think that actually some of the things that they are doing around it, with having their the condominiums being very close to this lot, that does in fact impinge upon it, and does say that, you know what, some of the things that might have been, you would have said, hey, it's a buildable lot, it's been that way for a long time. Okay, that's true, but it also had a lot of open space around it. The next nearest structure was quite some distance away. It was, as was very typical in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, it was a little tiny piece of the lot that was carved off for the purposes of building a relational home, and that person lived there. But okay, it was substandard, but it had a lot of open space around it, which made that substandardness probably more acceptable. I now see a situation where, and again, through the applicant's own doing, at least by the fact that they bought into a plan that somebody else had previously gotten approval from this board, so to me they're now the creator of this thing around them, that they have condensed all of it, put it right around it, which tells me that, you know what, a substandard lot here is not as acceptable as it once was. And in fact, through what they have done, they have created a negative situation on this. And I think they had an opportunity to have gotten it much more clean and perhaps, not gotten as many units as they got on their property. And they could have made this a more conforming lot with maybe just a frontage issue, although that could have potentially been resolved as well. And with that, I think that we would be, I don't think it meets the hardship criteria, and in some sense doesn't meet the overall characteristics of the spirit of the ordinance as well. So in my mind, this particular application fails. It does not imply my thoughts or at all on the next one we're going to hear, but I think this particular one, with the closeness of the units by it, I don't see where we can legitimately grant the variances. My thought. And I would also just want to add one more thing, which is my experience is Chimberg is actually a very, very good developer. They're very, very conscientious. They clearly, as the applicant's own representative has indicated, they've renovated 200-year-old mills. I don't think a 1950s house is beyond their capabilities to go and renovate. And I am kind of surprised at what's being brought forward based off of my experience with that developer. Thank you.
Mr. Mattson.
Yeah, I guess something I'm struggling with is there's a lot of information that's been presented tonight, and reviewing the packet before the meeting, I did what I always do, where I just look at this specific application as I believe we're supposed to do. And what this application is it's a undersized lot that can't just by its very nature of lot lines being the lot lines that they are, it's a non-conforming lot. I guess you could say that they could ask for changing the lot lines, because in this particular case, the owner happens to also own the adjacent lot, but that's not always a situation, and I believe that I was under the impression that that's not something we should consider of what the neighboring lots do. So I guess it all depends on how we look at it, because if we just treat this application as a standalone application, a lot of what's being discussed is not relevant, I guess. So, yeah.
I don't see how this isn't a standalone application. I don't know how we can shoulda, woulda, coulda from 2 years ago. Or tell them that they ought to renovate a property that they own and not build it. If the city wanted this to be a historic district, they would have made it a historic district. Right now, they have a piece of land that's undersized that was I don't know what the zoning ordinance said when this house was built. Did it have to be 7,500 square foot minimum? Did it have to be any minimum? I don't know. Right now, they want to build a house on their land that is limited, and I just don't see that as a big ask if you don't go into all of the what would have beens. Okay, who else would like to speak? All right, is there a motion?
I will make a motion. Don't start giving me dirty looks yet. I haven't even made the motion. I would move to approve the application as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
So regarding the first two criteria, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, nor would it be actually that it would observe the spirit of the ordinance. The public interest is to basically maintain. It's nicely written up here. Let me just scroll back. Hold on. Between the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance, I don't see any impact on the public interest with regard to safety or even creating a more overcrowded condition within this neighborhood. I do not think that there is anything in here that flies against the general character of the area. And therefore, I do believe that it satisfies 10.23321 and 2.2. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. This is the next criterion. With regard to substantial justice, even though there is a feeling within the neighborhood amongst some of the abutters who spoke here today that they're losing a piece of history, that really is, with the exception of certain types of character districts or the historic district, it's not really what we're considering here. Substantial justice in this sense means that there would really be a tangible loss to the public that would outweigh the benefit to the owner. And I cannot see, nor did I hear in any of the public comments, any substantial loss to the public that would outweigh the rights of the owner to build on this property as they see fit. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of the surrounding properties. Most of the surrounding properties are these condo units. These are the immediate abutters, and I see no impact on those whatsoever. In fact, they're all owned by the same person, and in this case, that's relevant because I do not believe that the owner would change this lot in a manner that reduced the value of their other holdings in this neighborhood. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. So hardship here, again, I know the board understands this, but with regard to people who took the time to come here and share their views with us from the public, hardship is really defined in a very particular way for the purpose of land use determinations, and that is that there is something about the property which makes it hard to use in full compliance with the zoning ordinance. And the thing that is the hardship of this property is its pre-existing lack of conformity with the variances that are being requested, the depth, the frontage, and the total area of the lot. Those things cannot be changed, and therefore to continue this non-conforming use, you really have to consider those things to be hardships of the property. And therefore, I do believe that 10.233.25 is satisfied by the existing nature of the lot. And that is my motion.
Does the second have anything to add?
Yes, with respect to the first two prongs, spirit and intent, the variance request here is for the frontage and the lot depth. The lot depth is 68 feet, and actually it probably does not even require that 68 feet. But the lot frontage, the street frontage is 85 feet. And there is nothing that the owner of this lot could have done to increase the street frontage as a result of the condominium development being developed next to it. And that also leads to, I think, the hardship. I think the hardship of this was that the previous variance that we granted was for one single lot that precluded actually increasing the street frontage on this lot. And I think that it does have a hardship for that, and I support the motion. And then therefore the interpretation or the enforcement of the provisions for the street frontage does not make sense for this lot.
Is there any further discussion before we take a vote? Mr. Ray?
Sorry, I did want to make one other comment.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, was there, I was
No,
looking
please
down, I didn't.
finish the motion.
Okay. I note that the applicant also requested relief from 10.311, and I do believe it's appropriate that we not do that, because if we were to relieve 10.311, we would be saying that this lot does not require a variance in order to be developed, and that doesn't make any sense. We're granting the variance that is required.
You agree with that?
Well, that relates to the minimum lot area and the street frontage. So I mean, another condition of this lot is that it is undersized.
But they're getting the variance on 10.521.
Let me just check that.
What do you say?
Yeah, so I actually addressed this in my memo. The request from the applicant was for 10.311. I don't believe that's applicable because that's the provision that says variances are required if the other dimensions can't be met. Where the applicant is requesting those variances, I think that eliminates the need to get a variance for that.
Right, okay.
Agreed, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to read.
And I discussed that with the applicant, and we took that out. We didn't put that in the notice. So I think it's all set.
Okay.
So I think you may want to withdraw that, the 10.3, unless,
I think he was just acknowledging.
I was just
Okay.
acknowledging that I believe it's correct that we are not.
Oh,
doing
okay.
10.311.
I think that's appropriate.
Further discussion? Mr. Ray?
Yeah, as I indicated, I will not be supporting the motion, and I actually am also very concerned that the argument for hardship is that this is something that exists, so therefore it constitutes a hardship. That's not how our criteria works. It shouldn't be the basis for saying that a hardship is there. And more importantly, we're saying that it can't be changed when in fact my argument is it is possible to get that changed. And I do believe that the impact of the surroundings, so the core thing that we are looking for out of the ordinance here is the proper amount of spacing between residential properties, and through the actions of building up right up against the property line, in essence, I think we've created a situation where relief for this property, it can continue its non-conforming current use, but relief for a new use in this property is not appropriate. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay, then we will vote. A yes vote allows the applicant's proposal to go through. Mr. Rayum?
No.
Mr. Neese?
No.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
No.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So, it is approved.
Interesting case.
Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and I'm sorry for all of you who are still waiting, but we're going to take a 10-minute break.
That's unfortunate.
Zoning Board meeting for April 16th, 2024 is now back in session, and our alternate, ML Geffert, has left for the remainder of the meeting. She has been excused. So, the next item of business is the request of Chimberg Developments, LLC, owner for property located at 216 Woodbury Avenue. Whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing structure and construct a new primary dwelling, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow 66 feet of frontage where 100 feet are required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 175, Lot 3, and lies within the General Residence A District. Is there anyone to speak to this request? Welcome.
Monica Kaiser, Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley, and Roberts. I promise I won't yell at you. Sorry about that. Again, on behalf of Chimberg, if we go to page 87 of the packet, Exhibit A. Are we still on Boyd?
Nope, this is the next one. Do you want to go to the plot plan?
Yeah.
260?
So can you go back up one so it's all of them?
Yep.
So this property is the one at the upper right-hand corner, right there where Steph is highlighting. This was a lot that was previously adjusted, but not its frontage. It was a lot that previously was long and narrow and went back, but it's been 66 feet of frontage. I think for a very long time. It may have at some point given some land to the hotel, but it's been 66 feet of frontage for some time. So the lot size complies, the lot depth complies. Those things were not changed by the lot line adjustment, and the frontage was not changed by the lot line adjustment. That is the reason why this lot is non-conforming. And again, it is a similar situation where the new owner, Chimberg, is proposing to demolish the home that is there and reconstruct a new home that complies with all dimensional requirements except for the frontage. If there's no questions about the plans before you, I would turn your attention to page 83 of your packet for our memorandum, where we go through the variance criteria. And given our and previous discussion, I would just ask for these arguments to be incorporated into the record unless you have a question about them. It's very similar to what I said previously in terms of this is a tear down and rebuild, so it's not contrary to the public interest. It observes the spirit of the ordinance. It's the same use that exists now, just in a different structure that complies with all dimensional requirements. It doesn't undermine any of the objectives of your ordinance detailed on page 83 and 84. I would submit it does not alter the essential character of the locality, nor threaten the public health, safety, and welfare, as I said. Similarly to the previous proposal, I would say substantial justice is done because I don't think there is a benefit to the public that outweighs the hardship to the developer if you deny the request. Granting the variance will not diminish the surrounding property values. Again, this property is in a thickly settled area. It's next to the hotel. It's a stone's throw from the bypass. And if it can be redeveloped with a more modern and accommodating single-family home that meets all dimensional requirements, I don't think that will have a negative effect on the value of any of the surrounding properties. So I believe across the street from it is Dennett Street, as well as a modern multi-unit development. And then there's some single-family homes there on the other side of Woodbury. Denial of the variances results in an unnecessary hardship. I would suggest that the frontage requirement cannot be changed. I don't think we can consider what might have been done to bring all the other properties in compliance previously. And it looks like, with respect to the frontage, the immediately adjacent property that was in common ownership and may still be in common ownership is only is 102 feet of frontage. So there would not be a way to take frontage from that lot without making it fail to comply with the ordinance. So for those reasons, I would say that the special conditions exist. Again, replacing the single-family use with another single-family use means there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance and its application. 66 feet of frontage has provided access to a single-family home for decades and will continue to do so. Removing and replacing the single-family home, if desired by the subsequent owner, is reasonable, where it's going to replace an identical use and comply with all the other dimensional requirements of the.
Other questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against? Public hearing is closed. What would we like to do?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance requested as published and advertised.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Rossi.
Stealing your thing again?
Stealing my criteria.
Yes, in fact, I am. Yeah, just give me a minute. Okay, in terms of not being contrary to the public interest, or contrary to the spirit of the ordinance, if this is a lot that's in a zone where this use is the correct use, it's a single-family residence, it already has a dwelling on it that is a single-family residence, we're just replacing, basically the owner is replacing like with like use with one structure, and therefore there is no change really in serving the public interest with this new development of the lot versus what's currently there. Granting the variance would do substantial justice, as this lot is already essentially being used in the exact manner in which this variance is being proposed. It will continue to be used. There is no loss to the public by continuing that use, and therefore there is substantial justice. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. The property is abutted on one side by a hotel. By another, on the other side, it is abutted by property owned by the same owner as this property. And I think it is illogical to assume that this proposed redevelopment of this lot would in any way diminish the value of either the hotel or the property owned by the same person on the other side of the lot. And therefore, 10.233.24 is satisfied. And then comes to the hardship. I'll see if I could word this one a little bit better than the previous one. The special condition of the property is that it is bounded on two sides by developed lots, and the side lot lines cannot be moved without bringing some other property equally out of conformance. So therefore, the 68-foot front lot line is really unalterable as in a way that would bring the lot into conformance for this purpose. And that is the hardship of it. It is the nature of the property and the lot that it cannot be altered to become in full conformance with the ordinance for this already existing use. And therefore, it is unreasonable to apply the ordinance exact strict requirements for continuing this use. That is all.
Does the second have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just say regarding the hardship, the general public purposes of the ordinance provision of this specific application is regarded to the street frontage, and as with the other, with street frontage and the other yard dimensional requirements, the purpose is to preserve light, air, and privacy. And in this case, even with the inadequate street frontage, the dwelling would still be entirely within the setbacks and still be able to meet that purpose. So there's no fair and substantial relationship for this situation. So I think it warrants approval.
Okay. Is there discussion before we take a vote? Mr. Ram?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to actually prove that every single application is considered on its own merits, I am going to support this motion. In this case, I mean, this lot was reconfigured by the applicant or the applicant's predecessor to be fully complying in every way that they could, other than the street frontage. I do think one of the other aspects of the hardship here is that it is bordered by a large open space that is associated with the hotel use on the next property over. So, you know, in terms of the true intent of the public concerns with the ordinance is of the feel of overcrowding. I think that helps to provide a relief on that side, and as a result, applying the ordinance as written to this particular property in terms of the street frontage it provides no benefit to the public.
Any further discussion? Okay. A yes vote approves the project. Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. The next item of business, item C, is the request of Cyrus Beer and Erica Gardner Beer, owners for property located at 64 Mount Vernon Street, to amend the variances granted on March 19, 2024, for the demolition of the existing detached shed and construction of a new shed to include the following. Variance from section 10.521 to allow a 2-foot side yard where 10 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 111, Lot 30, and lies within the General Residence B and Historic Districts. Welcome.
Thank you. Cyrus Beer, 64 Mount Vernon Street. So I've come back this month. I was here last month. I'm here tonight to try to fix a mistake that I made as a homeowner, first time doing this. That's something that I want to point out here. I think if you pull up, can you pull up the application?
Yes, what page would you like, Sarah?
Second page? There we go. So there are no changes at all to the location of the shed, the size of the shed. Everything is exactly what was presented last month. What I missed last month is what's circled here in blue is there is a point in the corner there that is less than 5 feet. And so when I asked for a 5-foot side setback, we still will maintain that 5-foot setback along that long south-facing wall there. I mistakenly thought that was the side setback, but actually it wraps around that corner there. So the change that I'm asking for is for a 2-foot setback It would still be 5 feet along that whole south wall, but it would allow that corner that's circled in blue to be built. Yeah.
Would you like to speak to the criteria?
I can. It's the exact same as last month. I'm happy to read it again. Yeah? Okay.
Yes, please.
It will not be contrary to the public interest. It will not alter the characteristic of the neighborhood. Architecturally, as per plans on the file with the HDC, actually, it's been approved by the HDC, so that may be slightly changed here. The proposed shed will borrow design elements from our house and will be appropriate to the neighborhood. Furthermore, as the shed is tucked away and fairly well hidden from the street, the impact will be minimized. Rebuilding the shed will not threaten the health, safety, or welfare of the public. By bringing the shed out from the lot line, we will be able to work on the shed without standing in our neighbor's yard. This will improve the welfare of the neighborhood. Currently today, the shed it's 1 foot from the lot line. Safety will also be improved by giving additional distance as per the fire code. The spirit of the ordinance will be observed. The proposed use is reasonable. Having a storage shed in one's backyard is typical land use in our neighborhood. On Mount Vernon Street in the neighborhood, houses often do not meet setback requirements, and what we are proposing is not out of the ordinary. What we are proposing is an improvement over what is there today as far as the side and the rear setbacks. Now, actually, that will be, I need to qualify that. It will be an improvement on that long south wall. Actually, it will be an improvement because today where that point is, it's only 1 foot. We'd be going to 2 feet. So I guess that is accurate. This will be an improvement. Substantial justice will be done. The proposed use is reasonable. There's no advantage to the public that outweighs the hardship to the owners by denying this request. The value of the surrounding property will not be diminished. Values of surrounding properties are expected to be enhanced by the additional setback and also by the proposed design and construction of a new shed. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship because the proposed variance and setbacks are an improvement over what exists today, and because a new shed with a design in accordance with the style of the neighborhood is seen to enhance the neighborhood, and because the use is not changing, a literal enforcement of the zoning provision would result in an unnecessary hardship for the homeowners. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. You're an honorable man. Thank you. Okay, you may sit.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? 2, 4, or against? Okay. Public hearing is closed. Motion? Yes, Ms. Margerson.
I would like to move that we approve the variance request as presented and advertised. If I get a second, I'll go through the criteria.
Mr. Mantle has seconded you.
Okay. So the first two criteria are section 10.233.21 and section 10.233.22. We often deal with these together. And granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and it would observe the spirit of the ordinance. My finding is yes on these matters, and that we often are looking for side yard setbacks in order to preserve light, air, and space between properties. The reality is that this is only for a shed in the back of the property. It is not for any kind of bigger structure than that. So I find that the spirit and the public intent of the ordinance, public interest of the ordinance is met. Section 10.233.23, granting the variance would do substantial justice here. I find that the finding on this is yes. And our inquiry here is that if there is any loss to the applicant that is outweighed by a gain to the public, then I forget what we're supposed to do with that. So,
because it's
yes,
written backwards.
There is no loss. The public does not gain by granting this variance, which is for a minimal setback for a shed. The loss, yeah.
The public doesn't.
The public does not lose by the granting of this variance, so it does substantial justice. Section 10.233.24, granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. We had previously granted this for 5 feet. This is just a loss of another 3 feet. And the surrounding properties would not be harmed by the granting of this variance at all. In fact, it would be bettered, or they would gain by improvement to the property, which generally improves the values of surrounding properties. Section 10.233.25, little enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance will result in unnecessary hardship. And here we have to find that the property has special conditions that distinguish it from other properties in the area, and owing to these special conditions, a fair and substantial relationship does not exist between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to this property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one. So my finding on that is yes, and we'll take it from the bottom up. The proposed use is reasonable. This is an accessory structure to a house in a residential area. The property does have special conditions, as we stated at the last hearing. The topography of the property begins to trend upward as you get further away from the side yard lot line, and therefore makes it difficult for the shed to be put any closer, any further in from the lot line. And so that, because of those special conditions, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to this property. And again, we're just talking about a certain corner of the shed that meets a jog on the line, and it's a de minimis request, and I believe that the property has special conditions that merit it.
Thank you. Does the second have anything to add?
No.
Okay, is there any discussion? Yes, Mr. Neese.
I just have a question. I don't have any problem with this request, but I want to make sure I know what we're doing here. The variance stays with the property when the ownership changes, correct?
Yes.
So if we write this as a 2-foot, does that mean the next person could come in and enlarge this shed up to 2 feet from the property line without coming to the board? And if so, are we comfortable with that?
Well, they would, if they went up, because that would still be a side yard, they would have to come back to us.
Because it's not
That's
conforming.
not his point.
We're granting a variance that says a 2-foot setback.
Right,
He's actually got 5 foot for most of it.
but he has to
Except for
go
the
by the
corner.
least.
Right. So could a new owner come in and enlarge the building all the way to 2 feet? And if the answer is yes, are we fine with that, or would they have to come back in again?
It depends.
Stephanie?
Yes, please, yes, please.
The answer would be no. So if somebody came in and said, this variance was granted for 2 feet, they would have to prove, with the plan that's presented, that they could meet 2 feet. That isn't the case. And the 5 feet still stands on the back and the other side.
Thank you.
Yard. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mr. Mann.
Yeah, what Mr. Neese is bringing up was one of my concerns as well, and I appreciate the city staff's perspective on this. But that said, I think over time, a lot could be lost and forgotten. And I think that we might be well-served by a stipulation that it is a 2-foot dimension from the jog in the property line and not the overall side yard, but it is a 2-foot from the jog location. I just think we will really preserve it for the future if we make that stipulation for this particular case, because it is kind of unique. I mean, really what they're asking for here is like probably less than 3 square feet of the shed is now non-compliant. But I think Mr. Neese's point is valid in that if we say 2 foot from the side property line, okay, so years down the road, someone could forget all the nuances of our discussion tonight, because we've clearly forgotten the nuances of discussions from 2 years ago, and could potentially rebuild something, which I would have some more concern with. I mean, I'm not concerned with the 3 square feet, and I think the applicant has made a fine point of the fact that even with that little property jog, that they can still do maintenance on the whole entire shed which is one of the concerns with the setback. So I would recommend that, I think we should add a stipulation, just, perhaps it is belt and suspenders, but I think the belt and suspenders would be.
Ms. Margison, do you accept that?
Yes.
Okay, and the second? Okay. Does everyone understand what just changed in the?
Yeah, I understand, but just to ask a clarifying question, I guess, of staff, if the structure is non-conforming and it's modified, even if we granted the 2-foot variance, if they wanted to make the other one 2-foot variance, that's a change, so you're modifying a non-conforming structure,
Right,
they would have to
which
come
is
before.
what the.
Yes, okay.
Yes, right, right,
In-
right.
Yeah.
No, the point was to make the 2 feet
I-
specific to the jog.
Right, if you put the clarification in there, I think it helps down the road.
Yeah.
Because a building, if it just goes before, the building inspector and maybe some future planner, they may or may not understand the subtlety of what is taking
Yeah,
place.
they see that the 2 feet is approved. Yeah.
Unlike
Okay.
Steph,
Not
right.
a record.
Unlike Steph, who's on top of her game.
Okay, everyone understands what we're voting for now? Okay.
So can we just have the stipulation, I just want to make sure that it's clear. The stipulation is that the 2-foot side yard setback only pertains to the back of the shed near the jog,
In the front of the shed.
the front of the shed.
Just where that jog is, because the remainder of it is 5.
Is
And
5.
we want to make sure it
The
remains
2 feet
5.
pertains only to the area of the jog.
We will call it the jog.
Okay.
All right. In that case, Mr. Rayum, do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. Okay. Item D, the request of O'Brien Family Revocable Trust of 218 owner for property located at 3 Mobus Terrace, I think is how you pronounce it.
I think that's correct.
Whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing structure and construct a new primary structure, which requires the following. Variance from section 10.521 to allow A, 10,823 square feet of lot area where 15,000 square feet is required, and B, 10,823 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit where 15,000 square feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 207, Lot 21, and lies within the Single Residence B District. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Attorney John Boson. I represent the applicants, Kevin and Sandy O'Brien, who are here with us this evening. We're also accompanied by Eric Weinder of Altus Engineers and our architect, Carla Goodnight. The O'Briens have lived and worked in Portsmouth for many years. They recently purchased the property at 3 Mobus Terrace, which is a home that was built in, we believe, 1970. Property is in the SRB zone, and it's non-conforming as to lot area and lot area per dwelling unit. The existing deck on the home also encroaches onto the rear yard setback. As you can see from the photographs, which we've contained in our packet, the existing conditions, the house is old, it is outdated, has substandard insulation. The windows are floor to ceiling, they're very unsafe. But the big problem is it's riddled with mold. The house is currently served by a private septic system, which isn't good given its proximity to Little Harbor. The house is basically functionally obsolete in many respects, so the plan is to raise the home and replace it with a new single-family home that meets all dimensional requirements under the zoning ordinance, except for, of course, the pre-existing lot area deficiency, which cannot be remedied. Our packet includes the architectural renderings done by Carla Goodnight that she created for the O'Briens. And because of the nonconformity of the lot, we do need relief from section 10.521, the table of dimensional standards, to permit lot area and lot area per dwelling of 10,823 square feet where 15,000 square feet is required. Again, all of the dimensional requirements of the ordinance will be satisfied. So with that background, I'd like to walk through the zoning criteria necessary for you to grant the requested relief. First, granting the requested variances will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, nor will it be contrary to the public interest. And the test here is whether or not the variances being granted would substantially alter the characteristics of the neighborhood and threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the public. With this rebuild, the residential characteristics of the neighborhood will not be changed. The existing structure and lot area are already non-compliant, and the identical nonconformity resulting from this project will in no way compromise the neighborhood. If the board grants the variance, there'll be no change in the essential characteristics of the neighborhood, nor would public health, safety, and welfare be threatened in any way. In fact, it will be enhanced by removing the non-compliant deck and the elimination of the septic system. Net substantial justice would be done by granting the variance. This requires the board to conduct a balancing test. If the hardship upon the owner outweighs any benefit to the general public in denying the variance, then substantial justice would be done by granting the variance. In this case, there's no benefit to denying the variance that's not outweighed by hardship upon the owner. Essentially, there's no way for the O'Briens to comply with the lot area requirements given the size of the lot. So as a result, the loss to the applicant clearly outweighs any gain to the general public. Next, the value of surrounding properties will not be diminished by granting the variance. And the O'Briens will be building a brand-new code-compliant home that's been tastefully designed by Carla Goodnight. This home will increase the value of the O'Briens' property and those around it. The property will become fully compliant with the rear yard setback by eliminating the raised deck facing the neighborhood to the rear, which currently is the property that's most affected by this nonconformity. So the value of surrounding properties will not in any way be negatively impacted. Next, in terms of hardship, the property is non-conforming as to lot area per dwelling and rear yard setback. Any residential development of this property would require relief from the lot area requirements. There are 6 lots in this neighborhood, 5 of which have the same nonconformity. So it's just a fact that this is an old neighborhood where substandard lots were developed. Use here is a residential use in a residential zone and is therefore reasonable use, and there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance as it's applied to this particular property. And the purpose of the lot area requirements is to prevent overcrowding of land. There's been a single-family home on this property for at least since 1970 without any negative impacts. So the relief being requested by the applicants tonight would not in any way frustrate the purpose of the ordinance. And there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance as it's applied to this particular property. So for all these reasons, we do feel the zoning criteria is met, and respectfully ask this board to grant the variances as advertised.
Are there questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Please come up.
Good evening. May I bring you some pictures?
Sure.
Okay.
Can you go down there?
Oh, that's okay, we'll pass it around. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, there's no, we'll just pass. Okay.
My name is Betsy Tabor, and I live on 55 Pleasant Point Drive. John and I have met Sandy and Kevin, and we look forward to being backdoor neighbors regardless of tonight's outcome. We'll both have had our say, followed the process, and we will respect the board's decision. From the day we moved into our house, we've loved being able to look out and see at a distance in all directions. The 1958 planners of this neighborhood built the houses close together, but they adhered to a lovely vision of creating view corridors between the houses. The O'Brien's house has a view corridor to the southwest with superb views in both directions. They've designed their main living space around this, which wouldn't be possible if we or our next-door neighbors built 2-story additions out to our lot lines. And as you can see in the photos, our windows that face the O'Brien's house look out over a fence to the open sky and pine trees in the distance. In our main living space, in our front room, at the stove or the fridge, at the table or on the patio, we love that open view. We don't particularly see the house itself. Such was the wise plan for the neighborhood. But the proposed house footprint is 43% greater than the original on an already non-conforming lot. The original house is 47.5 feet of length, and the new plans are for a 67.5 feet of length, because the garage has gone from underneath the house, which is true of most of the houses in our neighborhood, to beside it. Increasing the footprint from 1,400 to 2,000 square feet, 2 stories high, right out our back door, gives us very much a walled-in effect. It takes away our view and the blue sky. We can't understand the need for this or the hardship that requires so much larger a house. Losing our view corridor constitutes a loss, in our opinion. The board must determine if such a large expansion in an already non-conforming site plan is needed. We would be deeply grateful if the new house conformed to the existing footprint, and with respect, we submit that hardship needs to be proved to win approval. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak to, for, or against?
Madam Chair, just a few points. Ms. Tabor had mentioned that they enjoy the view out their back from all directions, and I'm just going to submit to you that a few photographs, and I don't have copies for everybody, but
I haven't seen.
this is a view.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The front of the home. And a view of what they enjoy from the front. You can see that the front of the home is designed with multiple windows so they can see that view. In the back, I think at best you can see 2 windows. This is a picture taken from the O'Briens looking towards the Tabors. And you can see that that view is extremely vegetative, and it's covered with a 8-foot wooden fence. So if that was an area that they enjoyed to look at the water, I don't think you'd see an 8-foot fence or the heavy vegetation that exists. I also want to correct Ms. Tabor that there are no view easements or view corridors on record at the Registry of Deeds. They just don't exist. I took this deed back as far as I possibly could, and they don't exist. And lastly, the point I'll make is that the Tabor's objection really don't have anything to do with the variances that we're requesting tonight. The only zoning relief we're requesting tonight is because our lot is small. All other dimensional aspects of the zoning ordinance are met here. As I mentioned before, there are 6 lots between Mobus Terrace and Pleasant Point, 5 of which need the same relief that we're requesting because these are all small lots in that neighborhood, including the Tabor's lot, which is also non-conforming. So unfortunately, it's just a fact of the neighborhood. But because we're meeting all dimensional aspects, we do believe all criteria of the zoning ordinance have been met.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak to, for, or against this petition? Okay. Then the public hearing is closed.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the requested variances as presented and advertised.
Is there a second? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rossi.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So for this, understand the concern about the loss of view, and as a board, we've had a number of, over the years, a number of arguments that have come before the board about the view that is being disrupted by a proposed change. As the applicant's attorney has pointed out, to really preserve any of that, it really becomes necessary to place some type of restriction on a subject parcel. So when this subdivision occurred, if there really was a master plan that was put in place on preserving certain view sheds, that really needed to be recorded as part of the deeds of each of the properties to try and preserve that going forward. Certainly the applicant right now would have, even if they kept the current home, would have within their right to add on a garage onto the side of it and expand it out and put it into any perceived view shed of any other abutting property. It's just the nature of what is allowed by our zoning ordinance. So in that sense, I understand the concern and certainly empathize with it. But unfortunately, from a legal standpoint and from the standpoint of this board, that's not a consideration that we can look at in regards to this particular variance application. So going through the criteria that we have, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. So I think the applicant has made we generally put these two together. The applicant has made a good argument that there is an overall characteristic to this neighborhood. When the subdivision was created, there are essentially all of these roughly about the same size lots that were created with homes placed on them, and they are not proposing to do anything different than that. It is still going to be a single-family home that is on the lot. Is going to actually be slightly more conforming, but in reality, it will conform with the other setback requirements of the ordinance. Still remains the same use on it, and it really is a neighborhood that was designed around this size of lot. So in that sense, I think it meets the requirements for both of those criteria. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. This is the balancing test that we have. What are the general public purposes of the ordinance, and what is it trying to achieve versus what is the applicant's right as a property owner? Again, the general public purposes of the ordinance here is to prevent overcrowding. In this case, we do have, again, an established neighborhood that was designed around this certain size lot, and the applicant is not proposing to change any of that. They're simply taking advantage of the allowed zoning characteristics of the lot and building a new home within that. So I think in that sense, from that overall balancing test, doesn't mean that there couldn't be one particular change that negatively affects somebody in some way, but it's the general public purposes of the ordinance are being satisfied, and there's nothing that, from that perspective, would outweigh the applicant's right to make full use of their property. Granting the variance would not diminish the value of surrounding properties. Again, that's a overall viewpoint of the surrounding neighborhood, and in the sense that they are building out and in conformance with the ordinance and on a lot, again, that has characteristics that are similar to other lots around it. There's no belief that that would negatively impact property values from the perspective of what we are granting. And then lastly is the hardship criteria, which really, in this case, I think it is a macro look at what are the characteristics of the envisioned lot in this particular zone compared to what is here. Yes, it's substandard in terms of total square footage, but that said, it is representative of a little micro area. So I do think that is different than what the overall zoning objectives are. So in that sense, there are unique characteristics with this property relative to the overall expectations of the zone that it happens to lie in, which says it's not really truly fair to apply the requirements of that zoning ordinance for that zone on this particular parcel because of that fact, because it has this characteristic that is common with the other properties around it. And that the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance. Again, it's a property, had a home on it. They're not proposing to change that use in terms of a single-family home. The size and dimensions may be different, but that said, with the existing home, they could also place an addition on it that would have those same characteristics because they're not doing anything that is outside of what's allowed by the setbacks of the zoning ordinance. So with that, I recommend approval.
Does the second have anything to add?
As Mr. Rayoum pointed out, we see a lot of cases at the zoning board where you have an existing use like this that is going to continue, but it's a non-conforming lot. It's not, there's no real basis for denying a variance request in many of these circumstances. There have been a number of suggestions made because there are often concerns about things that are not in our zoning ordinance, like the bulking and sight lines and things that, without an easement and things of that nature. But unless at some such time as there is some modification made to the zoning ordinance that would say that not all, that there are other things that could be considered with some kind of a formula that could be understood by people about how large of a house or how tall of a house you might be able to put on a lot that's non-conforming, but where all the setbacks are still nonetheless, conforming. There really is nothing that we can rely upon to say this is correct or this is not correct, and therefore, within the limitations of the ordinance as it stands, this is this is absolutely the correct judgment.
Ms. Murchison.
So I will not be supporting the variance request. I do wish that we had a little bit more time to discuss it, but this lot, and anything that needs to be built on this lot does need to have relief because of the size of the lot. But it is almost 2/3 less than what is needed for a single residence B. So that building coverage is 19.8%, which is close to 20, but the 20 goes with the 15,000, not with the 10,823. So I toured this area, I guess, a couple of days ago. It's this, unlike I like the design. I'm not criticizing the design. It's nice to see a design as opposed to something brought out of a book or something. But the renderings of the house show it without much elevation. When I went by this house, it's really high up.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it is really high up. This proposal, I think, would alter the essential character of the neighborhood. It's really out of character with what else is in that neighborhood. So I will not be supporting this variance request.
Just point of clarification, the information that is on page 142, drawing C1, does indicate that the applicant will be within the max building coverage of 20% based off of the 10,823 square foot
It's going to
lot.
be based on that.
I don't think there's any indication that they are getting extra coverage because of the.
I think it's going to really take up the lot because it's smaller.
Yeah, but it is meeting by the definition of our ordinance, the 20% requirement from.
It
is my
is,
understanding.
but it's still an undersized lot. Reasonable people are going to disagree, but I really think that this particular application, this particular house really has really may alter the essential character of this neighborhood. And I think it's going to look really out of place.
This neighborhood doesn't seem to me to have an essential character. There are so many different types of architecture in it, and some quite new, or at least some additions that are quite new. It is high, and I think it's certainly going to be noticeable, but it meets all dimensional criteria, and for me, that kind of settles the the deal. Were you going to say something, Mr. Massey?
Yeah, I have a general observation that I thought was interesting, so I figured I would share. It's interesting that you can have a property that meets both the street frontage and the lot depth, but is still too small in lot size. It's almost like you would think the lot size would come from just multiplying the street frontage by the depth. It's just I don't know. I understand you could decide to require a bigger lot, but it's interesting that you can meet the dimension, the perimeter dimensions, but then have it still be too small. Because it just seems relevant tonight because we've had multiple undersized properties with different aspects to them. Yeah.
We have. Are there any other comments? Okay.
Good night for houses.
I know, man. You think... Okay, so a yes vote allows the new house to go in. Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
No.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
No.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. May I just ask, was this Cal Canny's house? Yes. That's what I thought. Thank you. Okay, so
There is other business.
there is other business. Oh, yes, the training opportunities that are coming our way. There is the Planning and Zoning Conference on May 11th, which you can sign up to now, and I think those of us who have been will say that it's very worthwhile.
It's only done remotely, though, now.
No.
Is that correct?
Yes.
The one in
Yeah,
Concord,
it's
too, is
remote.
only remote?
It's remote only.
Yeah.
Is it? I thought. Okay, sorry.
I had no
I believe
idea.
so.
Well, that loses something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the only remote option, unfortunately.
Huh.
Because the
And-
lunch was really the best part of the whole thing. So.
It was actually pretty good, but I remember when I was new, it was really a terrific educational. Okay, and the other one is in a meeting, a lunch webinar that is this Thursday.
That's 2 days from now.
Yeah, that I'm not going to be able to actually hop on.
What's that about?
I'm going to let Steph tell you what it's about. Sorry.
Yeah, so that one's just part of the monthly webinar series that OPD does. It's the same, staff that puts on the big planning and zoning conference. Their, monthly topic just happens to be new board members and planning and zoning. So it's just a 1 hour, 12 to 1 discussion. Stephanie Verdile is one of the planners at the state, and she's running it.
So when you say lunch webinar, that means we're not going to get a free lunch?
No, you eat your own lunch.
Don't call it that.
It's designed
See
to be
what our
just,
priorities are.
during a lunch break, if you
You
wanted to.
may have already told us, but can you tell us how to jump on that again?
Yep.
If we are
So
free.
I emailed the link. I can re-email it if that would be
It
helpful.
would probably, wouldn't hurt.
And the fees for these conferences, if there are any, are paid for by the city.
The one that used to be in Concord, that is free.
They're
The
both
city
free.
used to pay for it, but
Okay.
it did say it was free.
That's the only
'Cause
reason they
now
pay
they
for
don't
it,
have
it's
to
free.
give you lunch.
They don't have to give me lunch.
These are both free, but I believe if you did find one that you wanted to go to and there was a fee, you can talk to Peter Fritz about that. And they can figure
Never
it out.
accuse the city of being cheap.
So,
They always pay for food conference.
so,
Free lunch? We're
would
there.
anybody like to make a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.